Are live. What's up, everybody? This one's super spontaneous. I just missed you all. I wanted to chat, wanted to share some updates. A lot of stuff going on in the world as well. Maybe we'll talk about that. Let's give it a we did no promotion on this, so let's just give it a few more minutes to give people time to log in. Viewers, let us know where in the world you are logging in from, where you're viewing from. I am back in Tel Aviv right now. I was just in the US for 3 months in LA, building my community and company, Grateful Giraffes, which I've shared in other episodes. It's because of my work with Grateful Giraffes that I haven't been able to do much live streams. I'm working a lot. For those who don't know, and I'm sure many of you do know, but building a company is extremely hard, harder than it seems from the outside, and it takes up a lot of my time and energy. And as fulfilled as I am with everything I'm doing, I do miss live streaming. I do miss facilitating conversations, speaking to people, learning from people. So I do yearn to come back and do more of this, and I'm planning on it. The I'm trying to think what kind of content like I can commit to right now, because the hardest content is one that you need to coordinate with other people. So to do a debate, which I love moderating, requires finding two people and scheduling with them. I don't have capacity to do that. Another way is to just do a one-on-one conversation, which requires finding one person. Also, it's still some time. We do have some volunteers helping, but everyone's just on a volunteer basis. No one can give too much time and energy. So it seems like just doing like spontaneous live streams like this is something I might just do because it doesn't require much. Just I have free time, things to share. I'll do it. But the goal really is to over time get back to doing it once, even twice a week, bringing together Israelis and Palestinians. But I do want to start broadening the focus a little bit more on anti-Semitism. I think with everything going on in the world, we are reaching new heights of anti-Semitism. I don't want to say like new heights, like the highest levels ever. I think probably, in the 1930s in Germany, probably was higher than it is now, but we are seeing scary levels of anti-Semitism. We're seeing the normalization of certain concepts and ideas that ultimately are harmful towards Jewish people. Kanye West running for president, having Nick Fuentes as his campaign manager or whatever his role is. And is like the presence of Kanye, Nick Fuentes, is it creating more anti-Semites, or is it just bringing them to the surface? Probably a little bit of both, I would say. But yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to focus on. And more so, I actually think it's easier to have an impact here than Israel-Palestine. I'm not going to do this instead of Israel-Palestine, but just reflecting, a lot of the arguments there's a lot of strong counter arguments for the anti-Semitic claims being made that are not yet popular, right? We don't hear people making them. The activists in general, the activists focusing on anti-Semitism, their approach generally is to find an instance of anti-Semitism, share it, and create outrage. It's not to address it. It's not to educate. It's not to have a conversation with that person. It's more about shaming them, attempting to cancel them. I personally, I could see some benefit to, deplatforming harmful people, but I'm a little bit skeptical about what that looks like, because who ultimately makes the decisions on who gets deplatformed? But we could have a deeper conversation on that at a later date. It's more so, I firmly believe that the best approach to dealing with any form of hate is to approach it head on. It's not to try to shut down conversation, but engage people who think differently. So I actually want to start bringing anti-Semites on the show, weekly conversations with anti-Semites, right? That seems pretty fun. And over time, the hope is to be able to popularize certain counter arguments to the anti-Semitic claims, because a lot of anti-Semitic claims are quite easy to debunk. And if we could popularize these counters, then I think we could actually have a shift in discourse and in how people view things. Uh, many, many, if not most, anti-Semites or even just people with mild anti-Jewish sentiment, a lot of it isn't like it's not often something malicious. It's often a misunderstanding or a misconception of who we are, what we believe in. Um, you know, so I very much want to have these conversations. I want to bring people together. I want to put out these counter arguments. So I am gonna on my free time try to do some try to have some folks on there. I do see Raging Blazer in the comments saying talk about the new government. So I mean, just very briefly, the new government is a little bit concerning, to put it lightly. I'd say maybe a lot bit concerning because of how little capacity I have. I haven't still been able to do a deep dive into everything going on right now. I just got back to Israel a few days ago. Um, I am going to tend to, if I'm doing a solo session or having a one-on-one conversation, I'm going to tend to do conversations on topics I'm well versed on and won't need to do much research because of my time constraints. If I'm moderating, then the amount of information I personally need is less. So I'm happy to moderate conversations. So like moderating a conversation about the new government, I'm way more comfortable doing than myself presenting the issue, just because I don't have time to go that deep on it. But I do think um, that we should talk about it. It's very concerning. The trajectory of Israel is not looking good. It's ultimately seemingly going to be very bad for the Palestinians and probably pretty damn bad for Israelis as well. So I would like to talk about that as well. If anyone has a recommendation of who we could bring on the show to have this conversation, let me know. Jake Mayer Galvin goes, Happy Hanukkah from Canada. Thank you, Jake. Happy Hanukkah to you too. Great to see you here. Vox X goes, anti-Semitism is always malicious. So, I mean, I would disagree. I think a lot of forms of hate, no, hate's not the right word. Hate, you could say, is malicious, but anti-Semitism is not always hate. It's sometimes believing certain ideas or notions about Jews. So that's not necessarily malicious. That might simply be a misinformed belief, and this is true of all forms, um, of hate. So let's just take another example. Let's say you happen to I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble with this example, but whatever. Let's say you are mugged by a black person, okay? You might then have some natural fear or resistance towards walking through black neighborhoods. That can be defined as a form of racism or anti-black sentiment that's not malicious, right? So there's clearly a distinction between those two, and we use these vague terms like racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism. These really cover a very broad range of ideas and concepts, right? Like having some fear over a group of people because of bad experience is clearly different than viewing one group of people as inferior to another. Sometimes these forms of hate are ideological, other times they're just emotional. Um, and I think this is actually an important nuance that many activists talking about these issues uh, don't have. So if we could have a more nuanced conversation on these types of hate or negative sentiment, I think we'd be better off for it. Yeah, maybe we'll also turn this into a call-on show. We'll bring in some people to share. I could drop a link. I could drop a link in the chat if anybody wants to hop on. But you know what? I kind of want to experiment something new. I I think I might start doing more video reviews. There's a lot of videos that are very popular, and I think going through the videos and kind of breaking them down and the flaws they make could be helpful. I also have a feeling it might be good for like Facebook algorithm. If you review a popular video, you're likely to get discovered. So, it's an interesting, it'll be an interesting trial. Maybe, you know, maybe let's start with one now, Um, let's see if I could set this up. I did come across a video the other day that I only watched the first minute. I said I was going to watch it this weekend, but let's just watch it together, right? Might as well. Um, what was it called? Something Leather Apron Club is the channel. Suppose that's like Ben Franklin had a group called Leather Apron Club. Okay, yeah. So it's called Nobody Knows That Half of Joe Rogan's Guests Have This in Common. What do they have in common? I wonder. Um, let's see. We have a comment from Paulina. Paulina, good to see you. And are you watching this on LinkedIn? What's going on? Yeah, I started streaming these to LinkedIn as well. It's a new feature, but looks like Paulina, who's a good friend and a volunteer for the Sulha channel, is cool. Is viewing from LinkedIn. How's that experience? So she writes, ignorance isn't always hateful, and believing that can be slippery slope into classism. Not everyone has access to quality education. I like that take. Cool. Thanks for that. Okay, share screen. Let's see how we can do this. Present, share screen, Chrome tab, boom, share. Cool. Hold on. No, I don't need to be big. That does that, and that takes, okay. Yeah, let's do it like this. Cool. I'm gonna play 1 second of audio. I just wanna make sure you all can hear this video.
42% of the political guests on Joe Rogan's podcast are Jewish.
Can you guys just confirm that you were able to hear that quick minute of audio? Never find this blab blab goes, you should host a debate between Kanye and Rabbi Wolp. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. It's we don't have such a big channel here. I think we have like 9,000 subscribers or something, which is cool for the amount of like work that's been put into it. But I feel like someone like Kanye isn't gonna give us the time of day quite yet. But at the same time, we did get Noam Chomsky, we got Norman Finkelstein. We have gotten some pretty big names. But if anybody has a contact with Kanye or wants to tweet at him, oh yeah, he got banned from Twitter. If anybody wants to somehow reach out to him, let's do it. I'd love to talk to him. I'd even obviously I'd have him on for a one-on-one discussion as well. Cool. I'm seeing that the audio works. So let's get started.
42% of the political guests on Joe Rogan's podcast are Jewish. Why is this the case? If you exclude the hunters, the stand-up comedians, the MMA guys that Rogan has on his show, 42% of everyone else comes from a group which makes up only 2% of the US population. This video is going to be about examining that fact in a critical light and looking at the data that I gathered to arrive at that figure. But before we get started,
I mean, just like first few seconds, he seems like a nice guy, and at least from this first few seconds, he seems to want to approach this from an intellectually honest perspective. But let's see. I haven't seen this video yet, so I'm hearing that the video is laggy. Is anybody else getting that? We'll continue.
I feel I have to say this as an introduction. A lot of you watching will have probably instinctively recoiled at the mere sound of this thought that I'm presenting to you. Oh my gosh, anti-Semitism.
Oh, and by the way, I'm watching this on 1.25 speed, just to get through it a little fast.
But I'm asking you to really consider what I'm presenting you and really consider where that feeling you're having is coming from. All that I'm doing is presenting you with a raw statistic and giving you the data that you can verify in the description below. I promise that I will.
Okay, so I mean, I just want to comment on this. A lot of people who hate, who spread certain hateful notions or even just stereotypes, often they approach it from, I'm just sharing the data. It's like a super innocent thing. It's just a fact. I'm not making any claims besides sharing data. That should almost always be a red flag, because what you decide to focus on, what you put an emphasis on, generally has a reason, right? If you are dedicating, if if let's say your only focus is to share data about crimes that white men commit, right? That's just the nature of everything you're focusing on. You're saying, oh, but I'm just sharing the data. Yeah, but you probably have some anti-white male sentiment, and this is true about every single group. Um, so we shouldn't just accept. I'm just sharing facts. Normally, there's an intention behind it. Um, and also, he makes the claim 42% are Jewish. We will give him the benefit of the doubt. I haven't looked in it, but let's keep going.
I will refrain in this video from making any statements which could be deemed inflammatory or extrapolatory. This will be a purely factual discussion on a topic which I'm sure most people would never even want to bring up, but I think it's vitally important that we do. To me, the dangers of such extreme overrepresentation seem all too obvious. Even if we were to assume that such extreme overrepresentation, the dangers of on a topic which I'm...
What was this? What's this slide all about? Why did this just pop up? The Jews really control the media. Is far less true for calling the Daily Show Jon Stewart a bigot and implying that Jews control the media. Okay, it's an interesting slide. Maybe he's trying to say that it's an inflammatory topic and that you could get fired talking about it.
I'm sure most people would never even want to bring up, but I think it's vitally important that we do. To me, the dangers of such extreme overrepresentation seem all too obvious. Even if we were to assume that such extreme overrepresentation happened completely by coincidence and there was no collusion at all involved, we should still be...
He says they seem all too obvious, but he doesn't explain why, right? So he says they seem all too obvious, but they're actually... I'm not sure they're obvious, right? So I would like to hear from him why, but let's continue. And here's another thing. Jews are highly overrepresented in a lot of industries. There's something that we need to understand about data, right? If you have a small amount of people, it's easy to be highly overrepresented, right? So let's take a demographic that is very popular. So let's say white men, right? White men, let's say, make up 30% of the population. They can never be overrepresented by more than 3x, right? If they are 100% of a certain industry, then they will be overrepresented by 3x. Jews, because they're 2%, can be overrepresented by up to 50x. Okay, so the smaller the amount of people you have in a group, the higher and easier it is to get multiple X's of overrepresentation. And this is very, very important to keep in mind.
Extremely concerned that the opinions of this one small ethnic group are being broadcast so far and wide and being represented as if they were majority opinion. Meanwhile, you have...
So here we're getting... hold on, I just want to hear the language he uses real quick. Sorry.
Are being broadcast. We should still be extremely concerned that the opinions of this one small ethnic group are being broadcast so far and wide and being represented as if they were majority opinion. Meanwhile, you have the real majority opinion.
Okay, so this is here he's making an interesting claim that you have a small ethnic group who has some kind of belief that is different from the majority, right? So, Jews have more of a voice than the average American, and their opinion is different from the average American, right? That's kind of the point he's making.
And being completely overshadowed, especially on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I think it's fair to say has a reputation for entertaining all different opinions from people of all different backgrounds.
In the beginning, the early days,
So this is actually already anti-Semitic for one specific reason. He is making an assumption that because you're Jewish, you believe something specific. Think about that. If you were to do that with any group, you would be accused of generalizing. That is a generalization. You need to make the case that being Jewish ethnically, that it says something about what you believe. But when we look at the landscape of Jews, there's a vast landscape of different opinions. There's even the famous quote, 10 Jews, 11 opinions. So he's pretending to come at this from a purely truth-based perspective, but now he's inserting all sorts of ideas that require generalization. Let's continue.
Have anybody on? Oh, Holocaust isn't real? Come on. Tell me more.
If so many of his guests, probably about half of them, are all coming from this one insular ethnic group, how can we...
Insular ethnic group. That's another red flag. So let's break down the single biggest glaring hole in a lot of the anti-Jewish narrative. Some Jews are highly insular. The more religious you are, the more insular you're probably going to be. Okay, so the ultra Orthodox are the most insular. Then you have just Orthodox, modern Orthodox, they're probably a little more insular than secular Jews, but they're not an extremely insular group as is. And then secular Jews are not insular at all. Now, here's the thing: people get upset. The whole idea is that Jews are overrepresented, um, but they're insular, right? So they care about themselves. But the Jews in power are generally the secular Jews. So the most insular Jews have the least power, and the Jews with the most power are the least insular. This is such a glaring hole in anti-Jewish narrative that let's try to popularize this. Again, the Jews that have the power are not insular. They're Jewish by ethnicity. They generally don't believe in the religion, and they don't hold a lot of the beliefs that concern people like this guy. So, to say they're insular and it's a problem they have this insular group, well, they're not insular, and they're not even religious. A lot of them are atheists. Some might have some spiritual belief or some belief in God, but they're not religious, and they're not insular. They're probably more American than they are anything else. And a lot of them, I'm not even sure are even like Zionist. You have like American Jews are becoming less and less Zionist over time. Anyways, let's continue.
And we really hope to get genuinely differing opinions. It's important to note here that Joe Rogan's podcast is the most popular entertainment product in the world. More popular than any TV show, movie, sport thing that's ever going on. It gets tens of millions of views a week. It is absolutely massive and is therefore hugely influential in shaping people's opinions, especially young people's. These are the opinions that tens of millions of them are getting every day, opinions that they digest and that become their own, that they take with them to the voting booth. The fact that so many of these opinions about...
All right, so I really hope he gets into what the opinions are. I mean, just the fact that he's showing a Hasidic Jew. How many Hasidic Jews has Joe Rogan had on? Honestly, maybe none. So like he came like, I want to approach this purely fact-based, but you could see he's being he's using trickery and deceit here.
About half are coming from this one tiny insular ethnic group should be extremely concerning to anybody. So it is with this mindset that I urge you to consider this revelation seriously and to avoid the temptation to call foul, which tends to be the knee-jerk reaction of so many these days. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Now, how did I get involved in this thing in the first place? How did I decide to start researching this? Well, as a 20-something-year-old guy, I consider myself a casual fan of Joe Rogan's podcast, like a lot of other 20-something-year-old guys. And it pretty much started off as a casual observation. Hey, there seems to be a lot of Jewish people on this show. Like, a lot. I decided to do some Googling because surely somebody else had noticed this, and I found 0 results. So I decided to launch a proper, full investigation myself. I began simply going through every single one of the 1,864, as of recording, episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast and began noting the races and types of every single guest on the show. This spreadsheet, by the way, which has all of the data for all of the guests, I will make available, like I said, below in the description. You can check it out yourself. And it's important to note here that in classifying Jewish guests, I only went by instances of confirmed cases. That is, if I could not find a positive confirmation online, either from Wikipedia or from maybe a tweet the person made themselves, that they were Jewish, I did not mark them as such. I said they were white. And this is a really big deal because it is not at all uncommon for Jewish people, for one reason or another, to hide their ethnicity. They'll say things like, yeah, I'm from England, as if to imply they are ethnically English, when in fact they are ethnically from the Middle East. So because of this, that figure of 42% Jewish representation.
Wait. So essentially, I mean, as we go on here, it's clear that this dude is a little bit more problematic than he initially presented himself to. He's saying that Jews aren't allowed to identify as white, and if they're doing so, they're hiding their actual ethnicity from the Middle East. So it's true that Jews do have DNA from the Middle East, most of us, but a Jew living in England has every right to identify as a white British person. They don't need to identify as a different ethnicity. There's nothing dishonest about that. It's a perfectly legitimate way to identify. Some would say that they don't consider themselves white, they consider themselves Jewish, which is also perfectly fine. But there's nothing wrong with considering yourself a Jew from England. That's perfectly legitimate. It's almost like this is just another form of othering us, saying, oh, you're not European, you're Middle Eastern, you're from there. Okay, dude, let's keep going.
representation that I'll keep referencing is, if anything, a low estimate. Consider it the very lowest possible estimate. In reality, it's probably much higher. All right, so let's delve now into the data and discuss it a little bit. So after I had collected all this data, I wrote a very simple Python program to basically do some of the counting and some of the analyzing for me. And these are the results I found. In total, as of recording this video, there are 1,864 episodes of the Joe Rogan podcast, not all of which were available on the Spotify website, and I was just going by the ones that were available there. As I said, I went through and classified all of the guests by their race and their type. Their type being what they're most known for, be it stand-up comedian or MMA guy, something like that. And so this is the high-level breakdown of those two categories. You can see here first race, which consists of white, Hispanic, Jewish, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, mixed, and Indian. And you can see also the 7 categories of type that I broke up all the guests into. These types include...
It's interesting how before he's like, yeah, Jews are Middle Eastern, but now he's separating Jews and Middle Easterns as 2 separate groups.
Comedian, that means stand-up comedian, basically. Politician, mixed martial artist, scientist, action adventure, we'll get into exactly what that means later, entertainer, and businessman. Now let's get into the percentages of Jewish representation on the show, which is kind of the main focus of the video. Let's start off by talking about total Jewish representation. This figure sits at 20.29%. That is, of every guest on the show, 20.29% are Jewish. This is actually quite low, but it's because some of the categories contain no Jews at all, which we will get into. Rogan's podcast also has a lot of repeat.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that MMA is going to have close to no Jews in it, but yeah.
Guests on it. So if we're only looking at unique guests, there were 856 over all the episodes, 156 of which were Jewish. That puts the Jewish representation in this category at only 18.22%. Which is pretty much the lowest figure that you can get any way you slice the data. Now let's examine a few of these different types separately because there's a few unique things to point out about each. To start, let's examine what I started off with at the top of this video, the political group. The group itself contains politicians, journalists, and people like podcast hosts when the podcast deals specifically with political issues. Across the history of the podcast, there have been 298 political guests, 124 of whom were Jewish. And this puts the representation, like I said, at about 42%. But keep in mind that this figure is a low estimate, probably a very low estimate. Of course, this was the most concerning group to me for the reasons mentioned above. I don't think you can really have a fair and open society in which this one group just has so much outsized political power. Next, I want to talk about...
There we go. He goes again. This one group, as if this group is a monolith, as if there isn't a wide diversity of opinion amongst this group. And he still hasn't said a single belief that that Jews hold, that they're pushing on Americans, that is concerning, right? So he's making these broad claims without backing it up with anything, really.
What is actually the largest group on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is the stand-up comedians. He being a stand-up comedian himself, he has a lot of them on his show. There were 759 guests, counting repeats, who were stand-up comedians. And of these, 171 were Jewish, or about 22.5%. This is still an extreme overrepresentation, but it's actually only half of that of the political guests.
Okay, so if he wants to be truly intellectually honest here, he would need to look at what percent of famous stand-up comedians are Jewish. Because what number do you say? 22%. Let's say you take all the stand-up comedians in the United States. Let's say you take the top 200 most popular ones. It's possible 22% are Jewish. And if that's the case, Joe Rogan is literally just randomly picking comedians, and they happen to be 22% Jewish. If you want to have a conversation on why there's an overrepresentation of Jewish comedians, I mean, we can, but I mean, it's a completely different point.
Or about 22.5%. This is still an extreme overrepresentation, but it's actually only half of that of the political guests. But that's not a reason to think that this isn't a problem. We all know these days that stand-up comedians are probably at an all-time high in terms of popularity, and they certainly, when they're doing their sets, do not keep it to just jokes. They tend to get extremely political, I think.
The Supreme Court is going in the wrong direction. Women want more rights, more access to abortion.
I don't care. Good. I hope the Jews did kill Christ. I'd do it again. Fucking do it again in a second.
So I think it would be absolutely foolish to discount the political impact that stand-up comedians have these days, with so many mainstream opinions actually stemming from a stand-up special at some point. Next, let's talk about the action/adventure/athlete category, which I just marked all with an A. This group contains all pro athletes, extreme athletes like the extreme marathon guys, non-MMA fighters, things like that. Funny enough, despite the fact that 210 guests fell into this category, a whopping 0 of them were Jewish, which, funnier still, means that this category is actually closest to being in line with the Jews' 2% population figure. And while it didn't...
You see, but again, if he wants to be intellectually honest, one thing that he should ask himself, right? If he's unsure why Jews are overrepresented in some areas, why does he not have similar questions about why Jews are underrepresented in other areas, right? And often the reason why they say that Jews are overrepresented, they say it's nepotism or collusion, right? But when we're underrepresented, it's just convenient to ignore that.
didn't count the MMA specific shows, there were still, in the main series, 110 MMA guests, also none of whom were Jewish. So this is important to note because not only is that 42% figure already a low-end estimate, it's also skewed by the fact that there's so many bodybuilders and like extreme marathon runners and MMA guys that Rogan has on a show. And let's just say that these aren't stereotypically Jewish things to do. And lastly, let's talk about the scientist category real quick. About 148.
Well, he kind of answered it, right? So they're not stereotypically Jewish things to do. It's true. There's certain culture and upbringing that many Jews have that make them lean towards certain industries, which would allow them to be overrepresented in those industries. Yeah, that's true.
8 guests on Rogan's show were scientists, and 30 of whom were Jewish. This puts their representation in this category at 20.27%. Now, this may actually be...
And so he needs to look at prominent scientists and what percent are Jewish. It might be around 20%.
Viewed by a lot of people as a positive because, well, science is usually held in high regard, and rightly so. But let's not forget that a lot like stand-up comedy, science has been used a lot these days to promote political agendas.
Gender is like sex. It's on a spectrum.
So that's pretty much all I want to do in delving into the data itself, just kind of a high-level overview. I don't want to draw too many conclusions off of it, extrapolate too much, like I said at the start. I'll leave that to you. Like I said, look at the data in the description below. What I would like to do, however, is just talk through a few of the questions that this data brought up for me. Primarily, I think most interestingly is, does Rogan know what is happening on his show? Now, while it is always possible that he doesn't know, and I don't want to throw undue blame on the man, I think it's so supremely unlikely that he isn't aware in some way, shape, or form of what's happening that it'd be an insult to his intelligence to suggest that he's completely unaware. Native Americans are also about 2% of the US population. Imagine if half of the guests he had.
Yes. So again, he's trying to make an assumption of if Joe Rogan knows or not. But if you were to look at the data of prominent Jews in these industries, and he were to see that they're similar to the percentage of who Joe Rogan has on, then he could conclude that Joe Rogan isn't giving any preference to an ethnic group. You see, he went super thorough with doing research, but he didn't do research that might counter some of what he's saying, which says a lot about who he is and what he's trying to do.
Had on a show were Native Americans. Don't you think someone would point this out at least? Like, even not maliciously, just like, hey, isn't this kind of weird? Why does this keep happening? And you would be foolish to assume that all these Native Americans kept coming on a show by accident. It was just circumstance. Obviously, something's happening there. It's not even necessarily a bad thing that all these Native Americans are on the show. It's just, it's worth commenting on. I don't know. Just because of the nature of the thing, that it is Jewish people. And there's such a stigma around calling them out and calling out power structures that they're involved in, that Joe just hasn't brought this thing up. He's afraid to. So assuming that Rogan does kind of know what's going on his show, the show that he's done by himself for over a decade, we have to ask ourselves, does he know and just not think it's a big deal? Is it possible that while Rogan is kind of aware, like, yeah, there's a lot of Jewish people on my show, is it possible that he's just never stopped to consider the deeper ramifications of it, that he really just doesn't think it's a problem?
You see, he keeps mentioning these deeper ramifications, these problems, but he refuses to acknowledge what they are.
In his mind, it could easily be chalked up to, yeah, it's just Hollywood, of course. Or the other possibility is he aware of what's going on, but doesn't want to rock the boat. This would actually be a pretty reasonable course of action, given the guaranteed backlash that would come from making that revelation to the world. It would be a way bigger story than any supposed controversy that Rogan has been in.
Wait, I don't follow. So he's saying Joe Rogan does it so he doesn't get backlash, but Joe Rogan, from at least what Joe Rogan has said, that he decides which guests he wants on. So he doesn't need to make a public announcement about him preferencing Jews. Like what? Like if Joe Rogan cares about it, he could just stop doing that. That's just a flawed point that he's making. It's just not logical.
Involved in thus far. And I can really understand and sympathize with not wanting to kick that hornet's nest when the ADL is the most well-funded and the most militantly litigious organization in the world. So while we can't be sure what Rogan himself thinks about this, I think it's reasonable to assume that he knows in some way, shape, or form.
About the ADL being the most well-funded and litigious, I mean, I don't know. You know, if this guy just spent the past 10 minutes making intellectually honest arguments, I maybe could have believed that last claim. But, you know, as we're seeing, this guy comes on trying to be an honest actor that's intellectually honest and actually did the research. But it's very clear that he's coming in with an agenda and trying to paint a certain picture, and is anti-Semitic. Like, and you all know that I'm not big on just throwing around these labels, but this guy definitely has anti-Jewish sentiment. He's definitely concerned when Jews are in power. He thinks Jews view the world differently. He thinks he generalized Jews multiple times in this video. So yeah, bro. I mean, if you ever watch this, you're an anti-Semite. I'm happy to have you on the show to discuss it. Let's talk about it. But as you are now, you definitely don't like us that much. That's obvious.
But hey, Mr. Rogan, if you'd like to have me on your podcast to clear this thing up, we can arrange that.
Oh, well, that's funny. I just invited him on, and now he's inviting John. Okay. I mean, cool. That was kind of fun. So, hold on real quick. Let's stop this. Cool, we're back. Yeah, why would Joe Rogan have such a loser on his podcast straight up, you know? I actually commented on this video. I commented, thanks for putting this together. I'd love to have you on my channel to talk about something like that. And me thanking him is just because, you know, if you want to get something from somebody, you should generally start it with something nice. You know, is it still here? Did he respond? Or is it? No, I don't see my comment. If anybody, I'd like to have this guy on the show. Let's talk to him. You know, this is the video. If anybody can find who this guy is, his name isn't available, but if anybody wants to find this guy, let's you know, help me reach him. Let's get him on the show. Let's talk about it. Why not? Cool. I see there's a bunch of comments. I want to just go through them. We have another Chag Sameach from Unknown Leaf. Chag Sameach to you too, which is happy holidays in Hebrew for those who don't know. Just then speaks, but some would argue that the secular Jews are using these religious Jews to push an unofficial program of settlement expansion. So actually, I mean, one could make that case, but it's a bad case to be made. If you look at the most pro-Israel demographic in the United States, it's not Jews, it's evangelical Christians, which are the largest voter bloc, and they are also right-wing. The Republican Party is way more pro-Israel than the Democratic Party, although both are quite pro-Israel. And if you know, you could try to attribute the pro-Israel to the Jews in America, but the evangelicals not only have a lot of money, but they have a way larger voting bloc than Jews. And that's why the Republican Party is generally more pro-Israel than the Democratic Party. So that's not really an argument that holds water. Well, this comment is pretty wild. Honestly, I had come across Joe Rogan's show through Sulha. Before that, I had no idea. Well, there we go. In some worlds, we are bigger than Joe Rogan. Cool. Let's see. Vox X goes, how does anyone believe this shit? Well, you know, people believe stupid shit, you know, that's pretty consistent through history and through humanity. It's unfortunate, but you know, that's how it goes. The presence of Jews on a show is a demonstration of outsized actual powers. Joe Rogan's show, the fourth branch of the American government. Yeah, I mean, you saw how he made all these claims and all these. There's highly problematic. It's obvious why this is problematic. Yet he did not even get into it. Well, I mean, let's try to be fair. He alluded to and outright said that this group shouldn't have such a say over things because they're so small, but he didn't explain not once or even hint at what this group has a say over or how their views differ from the average American, right? It's true that 70% of Jewish Americans vote Democrat. Okay. So let's say you are a Republican or right wing in any capacity. You could see how you might have concern because the Jews are your political opposition, and with their resources and connections, bolster the Democratic Party and strengthen certain liberal ideas. That's true, but that's not a Jewish thing. That is literally a liberal American thing, right? So any liberal American is trying to support, or not any, but generally speaking, liberal Americans are contributing to left-wing narratives and the Democratic Party. It's not a Jewish thing. It's a liberal thing. Him making it about Judaism is the telling sign there. Fascinating goes, who is this nerd? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny because that video is proof that being smart doesn't say any like, you can be smart and dumb at the same time. Because that guy is obviously above average intelligence, but he's also pretty dumb, right? So, intelligence is a complicated one. Let's see. Vox goes, if he's mad about the amount of Jews and their outsized influence on American society, he'll be real mad about straight white Protestant male presence in the government. Well, he won't because he is one of those, right? I don't know if he's Protestant, but yeah, clearly, he sees that as his in group and doesn't care about it. And here's the thing: if 70% of Jews were Republican, he might also feel differently. A lot of it seems like a lot of right wing anti-Semitism comes from because Jews strengthen left wing ideas in the United States, right? Which again is not at all a justification to generalize and have an issue with Jews. Every American has a right for a political affiliation and to promote that political affiliation. Um, and if 70% of 2% of the population is vote Democrat, that's a tiny drop in the bucket of the actual voter base, donor base, and political influence. So again, to make it seem like it's a Jewish thing, no, man, it's just not. Adar, if he did, he would probably be in danger of being banned, rightfully so. So that's probably why he's being aggressively vague. I mean, he could. I mean, I agree. He's trying to like toe the line without getting banned, but he could have explained him taking it a step further and explaining what it is that Jews value that he's concerned about. That wouldn't have crossed the line he didn't already cross. So no, I don't. No, I just don't think he really has such a coherent viewpoint there. It's more so comes from the idea. And again, I'm making an assumption about how he views things, but based on that video and based on speaking to many anti-Semites, they view Jews as very monolithic in how they view the world. They look at certain texts in the Talmud primarily that are supremacist, you could say, and then they attribute those supremacist views to people in positions of power. And whether this is just them being misguided or just being disingenuous, it you know well, let's say if you're being disingenuous, then you know the truth and you're just bullshitting. But let's say you genuinely believe that the majority of Jews think that they need to enslave the goyim, right? Some people believe that. We had Adam Green on the show. That's one of his beliefs. So let's say you think most Jews believe that, and you see that Jews are like 30% of media executives, 30% of finance executives, right? 30% of Hollywood executives, and only 2% of the population. You're like, okay, well, this group that wants to enslave us has an awful lot of power. That is legitimate reason for concern. So it shouldn't even be hard to be sympathetic with that idea, but that idea is predicated on a massive falsehood that the majority of Jews have supremacist views and that they want to enslave or annihilate the goyim. And in fact, the Jews in power are the most secular and least likely to hold those views. Mossad goes, hello. Hey, Mossad, good to see you. Certainly there are better ways to clout chase Joe Rogan. Yeah, good, true. Mossad goes, there are many videos like this. We debunk them on a regular basis. Cool. Hey, Mossad, maybe we find some common ground that we could work together on. So Mossad, you're saying you talk to these people all the time. If you have personal contacts with like certain anti-Semites, I'd love a connection. I want to start bringing them on the show, just to talk to them. So I'd appreciate a connection. Isani asks Adar, why don't you invite him and Schwartz together? Who's Schwartz? I'm not sure who Schwartz is. Yeah, VoxX has an interesting point. It's like Palestinians are a tiny, nearly non-existent part of the American population. Why do we discuss their issue? That's true. Palestinians have successfully made their cause very important for many Americans in a way that makes their cause widely overrepresented. Yeah, true. That's true. These people are highly paranoid and need help. I would agree that there's a lot of paranoia in these anti-Semitic, in many anti-Semites. A lot of it stems from paranoia. That's true. Justin speaks if we'll chat on Discord. You guys, Mossad, you want to come on? We could open this up to people. I'm going to drop a link in a minute. I just want to get through these comments and then I'll drop a link. Will we do an after party on Discord? We haven't done that in a while, but I'm down. We could do it. I don't know if I'll stay, and I do need to go soon, but we could try to do something. Maybe it would be interesting to have BHI anti-Semite on the light. Yeah, I would love to have a Black Hebrew Israelite on. Well, I've interviewed Ashriel, who's a friend of mine. He's a Hebrew Israelite from Dimona. He actually says that Black Hebrew Israelite is not the name they want to be called. He says they prefer just Hebrew Israelite. The Hebrew Israelites in Israel are the most moderate of all of them. They live amongst Jews. They serve in the military. So they're relatively integrated into society, as opposed to Hebrew Israelites in the United States, who just view us as imposters who are living on their land and they are the real Jews. I'm happy to talk to a Hebrew, an American Hebrew Israelite, because they're a fair bit more extreme than the ones living here. And here's a challenge with a lot of anti-Semitic discussion. A lot of it's rooted in conspiracy theory, which is very hard to debate. So if someone were to come on the show and start making these wild claims about things Jews have done, to debunk that on air requires massive amounts of research. So if I'm doing these conversations, I'm gonna do it in a way that navigates around the anti-Semitic, around the conspiracy theories, because that just bogs you down, and it's almost an impossible conversation to have. Let's see. Cool. I'm dropping the link if anybody wants to join. Call-in show. Just click the link. We'll bring you on. Since we're on the topic of Hebrew Israelites, I mean, you could almost debunk their claim with logic, right? So check this out. Hebrew Israelite, that movement was started by a Baptist, an African-American Baptist, in the late 1800s. And the claim is that we are the real Jews. Now, I'm not sure. Do they believe that all Africans are the real Jews? That Black people originated in Israel and then migrated to Africa? I mean, I'm not sure that's their claim, but if it is, I mean, that's just against scientific consensus. But if they're saying that there was some amount of Jews living in Israel, and then when the Jews were exiled, they went to Africa, and then they were enslaved and sent to America, that's actually likely that there were some amount of Jews that went from Israel to Africa and then were brought over as slaves. That almost certainly happened. But if you're an African American, you very sadly had your history erased. And a lot of the problems I think we see in certain Black communities in the United States are a result of having their history erased. So, and it seems like this narrative of Hebrew Israelites saying they're the real Jews is about reclaiming a history of their own. But because their history is erased, and because since they were brought here as slaves, they have been intermarrying with other African Americans with zero knowledge of background prior to coming, the Jewish slaves that were brought over have now for the past few hundred years been mixing with other African Americans. So while, Jews can take a DNA test and see that their DNA, at least part of it, Ashkenazis, I know it's 40 to 50% is Middle Eastern. We could see that our DNA comes from the Middle East. Hebrew Israelites cannot prove that from DNA. And if you just try to follow the trail of them coming from Africa, you may have had some Jews, but they've now for many generations been mixing. So again, it's kind of very easy to see a glaring hole in this narrative. Isani, I think you're talking about Andrew Schultz, not Schwartz, but yeah, he's a comedian and a friend of Joe Rogan's, right? Are you talking about Andrew Schultz? Lone Wolf goes, they claim the Atlantic slave trade consisted of black Hebrews. Their identity was stolen. If the autonomical DNA doesn't match up, they use haplogroup science to validate their claims. Okay, Lone Wolf, thanks for that. Are they saying that the only blacks that were brought over were Jewish? Is that what they're saying? I see we have Richard from Berlin here. I'm going to bring on Richard. Richard, what's up?
Hag Sameach, Hanukkah Sameach.
Thank you. Wait, hold on. I also see there's Justin in the waiting room. Justin, I'm going to bring you on. You don't need to put your video on, but if you could at least give yourself a little profile picture that's more aesthetically pleasing, I'd appreciate that. Cool, Richard. What's up? What's on your mind?
Yes, well, it's very interesting. And I think we are in uncharted waters because I think we are in a moment of Jewish history that has no precedent. Really, the Jews are doing better than in any other period of their history. Even better than the mythical times of King David. Because we are prominent. We have lots of success in most rich countries, and we have the state of Israel that is a marvel. And there was never in Jewish history such a situation. So sure. I think that's an important factor that stimulates anti-Semitism more than ever before, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. If we weren't represented in multiple industries, then clearly we wouldn't have nearly as much hate. That's without a doubt. Hold on one second. Yep, I completely agree. Real quick, I see the traveling clad. Good to see you here, brother. $20 super chat. It goes, love you, man, and thanks for everything you did for me when I was in the Holy Land. So everyone, check out his YouTube channel. He's an awesome content creator. You could click on his page, go give him a sub. He's doing awesome content. He's Israeli American. He spent some time here, and we really connected. Richard, I'm going to keep you on, but I am going to bring on two more people. Justin, welcome. Mossad, welcome. Great to have you all here.
Hello.
Thank you.
I have a very visually pleasing avatar.
Yeah, I like it. What's up, Mossad? How you doing?
We're doing okay. People don't know we have a channel where we debunk a lot of videos like this from the left and the right. So from the left, you get this accusation that Israelis are fascists and Nazi-like, and on the right, you get the accusation that the Jews are communists and universalists, and they want a global government where they will control everyone. I normally attack them back. I don't try to explain anything. I just attack them back and say, get out of Israel. Stop bringing your crazy ideas to Israel. You're ruining our society. So they're not ready for this kind of talk. They're normally ready for people defending themselves, and then they can pile on all their conspiracy theories. But I attack them with my conspiracy theories, which are not conspiracies, actually. They're backed up with facts. American influence on Israeli society, in my opinion, is too high. I think it's causing more problems. So I'm very happy to attack them on the same lines that they attacked us. And by the way, the point you made, yes, the secular Jews are actually possibly the least, what would you say, nepotist or whatever the right word is,
And
group
an
in
insular,
America.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they actually, the intermarriage rate, so the secular Jews, about 70% of them marry outside the religion. Similar numbers are for business partnerships. So secular Jews will start a business partnership with anyone, whether they're Protestant or whatever. It doesn't really matter. They don't really look into it. So yeah, the group with the least in-group preference in America, possibly. If you look at Irish or Italian or blacks, they tend to stay in their group more than the Jews. So this accusation of, it's exactly like you said, and the numbers show it. So you can actually show stats. The problem with these people is it doesn't matter. Whatever you tell them, they'll turn it around against you. So yeah, you are intermarrying so you can get your octopus arms into everything. Yeah, you see what I mean? So you just can't win.
Yeah. Cool, Masad. Thank you for sharing that little analysis. Feel free to also drop a link to your channel in the chat for people if anyone wants to follow.
Oh, thanks. I mean, we're just called the Juminati.
Sure.
The Juminati. And
Yeah.
you guys sometimes even debunk me, right? Or you have?
Once. It was more about, what's his name?
Adam Green.
No, was it Finkelstein?
Oh, Finkelstein. Yeah, Finkelstein.
Yeah, it was more about debunking him than you. But yeah, we were having a go at you as well. Well, you know that we argue with you all the time.
No, for sure. All good. I'm just saying, if anybody watching this wants to see me get debunked, or at least attempted to get debunked, you could go check out that video as well.
We weren't really debunking you. We were just having a go at you.
Yeah,
we have some disagreements and stuff, but I think on this, I mean, it's just about truth, right? So we're just trying to show the truth. It's not an ideology here.
Yeah, for sure, and it's completely legitimate to challenge political rivals, and it's possible I've been wrong on stuff, and I'm going to be wrong again in the future, and all good. That's why we have these conversations, so we could find get to truth.
The saying, the fact that I've changed my mind doesn't change the fact that I'm right. I don't know if you got it.
I like that. So I do see we have Johnny. I do see you in the waiting room. We're not gonna have time this time around, so I apologize. But next time, I'd love to have you on to share some stuff. I'm gonna give you the floor, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Thank you, Adar. I just wanted to talk about. I've been kind of active on the Discord server. I've been following Sulha for a few months now, and I'm trying to give a more Palestinian perspective because I know that the Palestinian presence in Sulha has been kind of low, and I like what you guys are doing. I like the fact that there's discussion going on, and there's diversity in that discussion. Some of the things that I just particularly noticed, like what Masad here was saying, was about U.S. Influence on Israel and stuff. And I just imagine when Netanyahu won the election, he gave an interview to TBN, that's a Christian broadcast network, or CBN, the Christian Broadcast Network, and the tone, the 700 Club and these guys, and the tone that he was giving was that I'm fulfilling God's promise. He almost spoke to them in evangelical Christian language. And I know he's a politician and he speaks, whatever language his audience is and stuff. But in a way, I see that the guilt also lies on Israelis who play the card of the Christian evangelicals, of the right wing, of the left wing and stuff. So in a sense, if you don't want to be associated with these groups, but you're participating and benefiting from them. So it's kind of a two-way street, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's very complicated. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And if I may say one more thing, Adar, there was a comment about that the Palestinians in the U.S., where I live now in the U.S., I'm Palestinian from Jerusalem, and I'm living in the U.S. And I'm kind of older than a lot of the people here, and I've been around for a while in activism, and it wasn't easy with the Democratic Party. Let me tell you this: in 1984, Walter Mondale ran for the nominee of the Democratic Party, and the largest Arab American civil group gave him a donation. He returned it and said, "I don't want your donation. I don't want you to endorse me." He returned it wasn't endorsement. I'm sorry, not donation. He actually rejected the endorsement of the largest Arab American organization because
those were the days.
yes, that was when the Democratic Party, and actually more Arabs were actually in America were actually Republicans, because the Democratic Party rejected them and he would return it. So I don't want to say that it's part of the more anti-Semitism that American public is becoming more pro-Palestinian. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to convince these people that the Palestinians are actually people, that they are a people, and that they're suffering at the hands of an occupation that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. So you can't belittle that effort that we've been doing for so many decades in the United States.
I don't think anyone was belittling it. In fact, the opposite. It said that very few Palestinians in America, but they managed to get.
Yeah, but we still have a lot to go. We still have a lot to go, and it's still.
Are you Palestinian, Justin?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes,
cool. And you're in the server as well.
I am in the server as well, and I use Justin as well in the server. And I'm gonna send you a message, by the way, Adar, to explain to you why I do what I do. Use Justin and the picture because.
Please do. I'd love to talk to you more about increasing representation. I mean, just you did make a few good points, but just because of time constraints, we can't go deep on all of them right now. But I actually think you and Mossad having a conversation would be interesting. Maybe we could set that up for next time.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you to you guys. Through Sulha, I've actually met people in life, not online. I actually met one of the guests that you had, Khalil Sayag, the guy from Gaza who's living in the U.S. We're great friends now. He's in Washington. I'm in the Bay Area. And actually he set up a meeting between me and the people of Roots when they came to Northern California. And I actually took them on a tour, and now we're in contacts to help them outreach to Palestinians in the United States. And hopefully this summer, if I make it to Palestine, and that's a long story about that kind of situation, but I will actually probably maybe visit them in Gush Etzion. I'm planning that this summer. So a lot of good stuff is happening, man.
Cool. Well, if you do make it over here, let me know. If I'm around, I'm in between LA and Israel now, at least for the next year. But I'd love to meet and just talk more about increasing Palestinian representation, because we've really made an effort, but we've struggled, and there's a few. There's one of the biggest challenges is just backlash, right? Like we had a Palestinian from New York come on the show. He got kicked out of his DAPCA class, for example, just for having a conversation, right? So it's like because there's backlash, because anti-normalization is so strong, it actually stops Palestinians from having voices and spaces where they can make a difference, right? So anti-normalization is stopping Palestinians from having a voice on certain platforms, which is very problematic. So if we could work together to find a way to bring more Palestinians on the show and have that representation,
I think real quick, I know we're short on time, but one thing that I think that we need to do here is we have to have sort of a segment on the on why that is, because there's a reason for that backlash, and it's a legitimate reason, to be honest with you. For me to go to Roots, it took me a lot of soul searching to go and sit with them, and it wasn't until the third day that I was actually convinced, you know what, I can see working with these people, or I can see cooperating with them. So there's a reason for the backlash, and I think it requires a whole segment, because there's a lot of soul searching and within the Palestinian community about where they stand right now, because there's no direction, there's no leadership. We're like a bunch of animals. I mean, I don't want to say animals literally, but we have there's no shepherd right now, and the flock is literally running all over the place.
Yeah, I hear that.
Isn't that the default state?
Yeah, and that's but it works to the interest of the Israeli government, to be honest with you.
Well, yes. I mean that is always been an issue for more for smaller societies when a state comes in, where the different tribes, the different groups are not able to claim their ground. So, but that's been an issue for Palestinians for a long time.
Yes.
Cool, guys. I do need to wrap it up, unfortunately.
No, it's cool. Thank
you, Adar. Thank you for your time, and
yeah.
I look forward to
Thank
speaking with you again in the future. And
Thank you, Adar.
Rod and Richard, take care.
Very much so. This live stream was so casual, but the viewership is decent. We have interesting people coming on and sharing thoughts. So if this is as easy as it is, if people like this, and we'll see how many views this video gets, but if I see like people are interested in this type of content, this is very easy to do on a weekly basis. So
just give us a heads up, more than 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
I'm in California. I had to run out of bed to get to this, so I'm in my pajamas right now still. So
well, I'm glad you joined. Yeah.
Take care,
awesome, everybody. Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
Chag Sameach.